1 minute ago, Britain watched something no one alive has ever seen before. King Charles publicly humiliating a sitting Prime Minister live, and the fallout is already spiralling into a political apocalypse. Yes, in this fictional scenario, the monarchy didn't just step into the fight. It detonated a bomb under Labour headquarters, and Keir Starmer never even saw it coming. It all started when Downing Street tried to push back against the palace again. After days of leaks, whispers and denials, Starmer thought he could regain control by calling an emergency press briefing. According to insiders, he was preparing a carefully scripted defence, something safe, polished, bland. But then, just as he stepped behind the podium, something happened that shattered the illusion of control in 5 seconds flat. The royal crest appeared on every major British network. At once, television stations cut away from the Prime Minister in the middle of his opening sentence. Reporters were left staring at their cameras in shock. Social media exploded instantly. Well, what was the king doing, and why interrupt now? Why here? Why live? Then he appeared. King Charles, stone-faced, eyes sharp, voice calm in that unnerving way that makes every word feel like a verdict. This wasn't a warm address. This wasn't a ceremonial message. This was something that the country had never seen. A monarch stepping forward as if to say, enough. In this fictional address, Charles didn't name Starmer directly. He didn't need to. He spoke of reckless political rhetoric, of those who forget the duty of respect that binds our institutions together, and of leaders who, quote, mistake power for wisdom and anger for strength. 10 seconds on air, and the message was clear. He was talking about one man. But then came the line that left the entire country breathless. The stability of this nation, he said, cannot be endangered by those who place ego above responsibility. That was it. That was the moment. Within minutes, Labour MPs were texting journalists the same thing. The king just ended Starmer's career. As the fictional address ended, reporters rushed back to Downing Street, but Starmer was already gone. Poof. Vanished. A political magician performing his final disappearing act. Some say he stormed out the back entrance. Others say he collapsed into a private office. In disbelief, cabinet members refused to comment. Staffers fled the building like it was on fire. In a way, it was. Meanwhile, the rest of Britain was glued to their screens. Commentators, analysts, even comedians were scrambling to understand what they had just witnessed. The monarchy, silent for centuries during political storms, had just taken a swing so clean, so surgical, that the entire nation recoiled. And the louder Labour HQ tried to push back, the worse it got. Anonymous MPs called the King's message outrageous, inappropriate, even dangerous. But the public reaction? Fury. Absolute fury. Every poll, every trending topic, every viral clip pointed to the same truth. People were siding with the Crown. By the end of the hour, Starmer's support had collapsed so fast, analysts were inventing new words to describe the freefall. Voters were calling into radio stations sounding betrayed, confused, shocked, but also weirdly relieved. As if the king had said what everyone else had been thinking for weeks. And that's when the second bombshell hit. A leak. This time, not from Downing Street, not from Labour insiders, but from inside Buckingham Palace itself. A leak about what Charles really thought of Starmer behind closed doors. A private remark that would turn the meltdown into a full-scale political extinction event. The leak hit Britain like a second lightning strike, and this one burned hotter than the first. According to palace insiders, who are notoriously silent about everything except what truly matters, King Charles made a private comment just hours before the live address. A comment never meant to be heard outside the ancient stone walls of Buckingham Palace, but of course, in this fictional meltdown, nothing stays private anymore. The quote spread across Westminster within minutes, exploding through WhatsApp chats, journalist group threads, and political war rooms at the speed of pure panic. The king, they claimed, had quietly told senior advisers, "There are moments when silence becomes complicity." That was the line. 7 words, 7 simple, devastating words that hit Labour like a direct strike to the heart. because deep down, everyone already knew what he meant. For days, the country had watched Starmer unravel live on camera. The shouting, the swearing, the bizarre outbursts about the monarchy, the endless excuses that fooled no one. Labour tried to spin it as stress, pressure, fatigue, anything but what it looked like, a leader in free fall. But when the king framed it as a national duty to intervene, that changed everything. Silence becomes complicity. Those words instantly became the most repeated phrase in Britain. People were writing it on protest signs, printing it on T-shirts, memes, parodies, news commentary, all of it hammering Labour with the same brutal message. The king spoke because Starmer had lost control. Inside Labour HQ, chaos broke into full mutiny. A dozen MPs demanded an emergency meeting. Others began drafting letters of no confidence. Some weren't even hiding anymore. A senior minister was overheard telling a reporter, "We cannot go into another day with him leading this party." Another MP described the atmosphere as a collapsing building where the fire alarm won't stop ringing. Meanwhile, Starmer himself wasn't making things easier. Sources claim he went into a private meeting with his inner circle and launched into another tirade, insisting the monarchy had overstepped, that Charles was being manipulated, that the entire crisis was manufactured to undermine Labour. His advisors reportedly begged him to calm down, to go quiet, to say nothing until tensions dropped. But he refused. He wanted to go live again. He wanted to correct the narrative. He wanted to fire back at the Crown. Publicly, that's when his communications director snapped. According to multiple staffers, she looked him in the eye and said, "Prime Minister, if you attack the king again, you won't have a government left by sunrise." The room went still. One advisor walked out. Another put his head in his hands. And in the corner, someone whispered the phrase that would soon dominate the front page of every newspaper in the country. "He's finished." Meanwhile, the Conservatives and Reform UK were carving up the political battlefield with machine-like precision. Nigel Farage, suddenly the voice of calm reason in this fictional storm, delivered another chillingly effective statement. When a Prime Minister wages war on his own history, his own traditions, and his own monarch, the public will always choose stability over chaos. And right now, His Majesty is stability. It was a masterclass in positioning. He didn't even have to say Starmer's name. Everyone knew. And just like that, voters who had sworn never to support reform were suddenly reconsidering everything. The Conservatives weren't far behind. Kemi Badenoch stepped up with her own message, stern but elegant. Britain has survived wars, turmoil and political storms, but only because our leaders understood the limits of their own authority. Another subtle dagger, another reminder that the king had acted like the adult in the room, while Starmer had acted like, well, whatever the opposite of that is. And just when Labour thought the day couldn't get worse, another leak, this one from within the cabinet itself, revealed that several ministers had already begun asking legal experts about the process to remove a sitting prime minister if stability demands it. Imagine that, the party that spent years fighting to win power, now fighting even harder to remove its own leader before he destroys them all. The panic grew so intense that one MP described the atmosphere as like being trapped in a burning building while someone keeps adding petrol. And throughout all of this, King Charles remained completely silent after the address. Not a public word, not a private comment, not even a hint of reaction to the political earthquake he had just triggered. And that silence, cold, calculated, regal, only fueled more speculation. What was the king planning next? Would he intervene again? Would he allow Labour to tear itself apart? Or was there another message coming, something bigger, sharper, more final? By the following morning, Westminster was vibrating with a single question. What is the palace about to do next? Every corridor, every committee room, every hushed conversation circled back to the same rumour that King Charles was preparing a second public message. And this time, it wouldn't be vague, subtle or symbolic. This time, it would be decisive, final, devastating. For hours, political reporters scrambled for confirmation, but the palace, frustratingly disciplined as always, wouldn't say a word. Not yes, not no, not even the usual sources deny speculation. Just cold silence, and that silence was enough to send Labour into an uncontrolled panic spiral. MPs who defended Starmer on television the night before were now deleting their tweets. Cabinet ministers were privately messaging each other that they could no longer shield a man who is dragging us into constitutional suicide. One senior Labour figure, usually calm and reserved, reportedly burst into tears in her office after learning 2 major donors had suspended funding until leadership stability is restored. Another MP collapsed into a chair and whispered, "We're finished. We're actually finished." And still, Starmer refused to step aside. In this fictional unravelling, Starmer called an emergency meeting at noon, demanding his cabinet demonstrate public unity or face consequences. The moment he walked into the room, the tension was suffocating. Ministers sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact, their expressions somewhere between fear and exhaustion. Starmer opened with a speech insisting he would not bow to monarchical pressure and that British democracy must not be shaped by royal intervention. Before he could continue, Rachel Reeves finally broke her silence. She leaned forward, voice steady but cold, and said, "Prime Minister, the monarchy didn't destroy this party. You did." The room froze. Then another minister chimed in, then another, until Starmer was surrounded by a quiet, brutal consensus. They no longer believed he could lead. He reportedly slammed his folder shut, shouted that they were cowards, and stormed out. A junior minister muttered under his breath, "Better a coward than a kamikaze pilot." By the time Starmer reached his office, half the cabinet had already begun drafting coordinated resignation letters. It was the political equivalent of watching a dam burst. Once the first crack appeared, the entire wall disintegrated. Meanwhile, outside Westminster, Britain was already acting as if Starmer's leadership had ended. Polling numbers continued their catastrophic collapse. Labour's support fell to numbers so low, analysts had to dig through archives to find a historical comparison. Reform UK surged past Labour for the first time in this fictional timeline, becoming the official opposition in real time. The Conservatives maintained a steady lead, watching from a safe distance as Labour imploded under its own weight. Newspapers across the country printed brutal front pages. The end of Starmer, Palace versus Parliament. The Crown strikes back. And still, no one knew what the king was planning. That uncertainty, that vacuum, that anticipation, it was the single most powerful force in British politics. Some believed Charles was preparing a unifying message to calm the nation. Others insisted he was ready to issue a constitutional reminder stronger than anything heard in decades. A few whispered something more dramatic, that he might subtly signal Labour must change leadership in the interest of national stability. In a monarchy built on symbolism, even a carefully chosen phrase could alter the entire political climate. By late afternoon, the panic reached a breaking point. A rumour spread that the king had summoned the Speaker of the House for a private audience. Minutes later, another rumour claimed Starmer's own deputy had requested a meeting with Charles to discuss party stability. Within an hour, a convoy of black cars was spotted driving toward Buckingham Palace, and news outlets immediately launched wall-to-wall coverage. Commentators speculated wildly. Was Labour delivering Starmer's resignation? Was the king sending a warning? Was the palace preparing a historic announcement? Social media exploded into a frenzy. Hashtags trending globally. Tens of millions watching live feeds of palace gates in total silence. It felt like the entire country was holding its breath, waiting for something unprecedented. Then, without warning, a royal aide stepped outside, handed a sealed envelope to the press pool, and disappeared back behind the gates. No statement, no speech, no clarifications, just one envelope stamped with the royal crest. Reporters tore it open on live television, their eyes widening as they read the single-page message inside. The king, in his characteristically gentle yet iron-edged tone, wrote, "At moments of national uncertainty, leadership requires reflection, dignity and restraint. Those who cannot embody these principles must ask themselves whether they still serve the public good." That was it. No name, no title, no direct reference, but the meaning was unmistakable. A monarch telling a prime minister to look in the mirror and face the truth. Within 20 minutes, half of Labour's senior figures were calling for Starmer's resignation publicly. Within 30 minutes, protesters gathered outside Downing Street demanding he step down immediately. And within 60 minutes, the entire country was waiting for Starmer to emerge and announce his fate. But instead of facing the nation, he disappeared behind closed doors, refusing to speak, refusing to resign, refusing to accept the storm he had created.